Hello, everybody. We are back upstairs in the Tolkien room, which is just a fancy word for the guest bedroom at my house, where we keep all of Illyria's Tolkien stuff, although I have it on good authority that we have now picked up enough Critical Role swag and Robin Hobb swag that this is going to turn into the fantasy room. I don't know about you guys, but there's a lot going on in the world right now, especially if you live in the United States, and it's a little. Well, I needed to stop doom scrolling, first of all. And second of all, I started a working back in October of this year. Uh, I don't make uh, any secret of where I lean in terms of like the political climate. I'm not going to like belabor that, but what I am going to say is I took advantage of a number of like the astrological conjunctions, the blue moon, and just sort of the building energy and intensity moving from October to November to begin this batch of Kyphi, which I called Phoenix. And Kyphi is an ancient incense that is made over a course of 10 to 15 days. It's a long, laborious process. Each day you add a new ingredient or set of ingredients. If you're making it traditionally, every time you add a new ingredient, you're adding in also intent and magic and hymns and all of this stuff. And I use recipes, base all of my stuff off of recipes that appear on the walls of the Temple of Edfu in Egypt, because this was used as an incense and a sacrament in ancient Egyptian temples for thousands of years, long before like the culture that we knew came along. Anyway, long story short, every batch, because so much goes into it, has become also kind of a magical working, a working of intent. And the one that I started in October was intended because it takes usually about 3 months for Kyphi to cure. And I was hoping that this one would cure for today, specifically for today, and maybe for January 20th. This one was made um, in order to sort of carry us through and carry the momentum of change and renewal and healing that I was really hoping would come. So it's called Phoenix, and it is called Phoenix because there is a myth. In Hellenic times, there was a belief that there was a type of bird, it was a migratory bird, and once every 500 years, it would return to the land of its birth. And it would gather all of these branches from precious incense bearing trees, cinnamon primarily, but also frankincense, myrrh, and it would make a nest out of these rich, extremely rare, extremely costly branches. And then that nest would be lit on fire like a pyre, like a funeral pyre. And the bird would burn itself to ashes and then be reborn from the ashes. So once every 500 years, the phoenix would be reborn in order to renew itself, and this cycle would go on and on. The phoenix bird was known as the Banu bird in Egyptian. And obviously that myth has come down to us in a couple of different interesting ways. But the idea of rebirth and renewal from the ashes, from breaking down everything that we used to be, and enduring this flashpoint of both illumination and destruction is the energy that I wanted to put into this particular batch. So forgive me as I like move back and forth to be able to read comments. And I won't be able to catch everybody's comment. I will do my best. So, I mean, the idea with this was I felt around about the time that this batch of Kyphi would be ready, we would all need a little boost, a little reminder that we can be reborn from the ashes. There is hope for renewal, and to sort of like bring that energy of coming out of like the worst, like burning everything down and still having hope spring out of that. So that is my gift, my magic, my working for this particular day in 2021. Fingers crossed that, even, oh no, okay, okay. Sorry, the stream just like blipped a little bit. But anyway, so the Kyphi, the one thing I've learned is so Facebook has done some funky stuff with like the new page experience and whatnot, and StreamYard and the platforms that I use to stream have not all totally caught up with it. So I will not be able to post any comments of my own. Every time I do that, the past 2 times, it just kicks me right out. So I'm not going to do that. But I will say that if you are interested in this stuff that I'm making and have made and that I will be rolling for you, it is live as of a couple of hours ago up on my webpage under, let's see, michellebelanger.com/incense or /Kyphi. And if you look for Phoenix, you can get the new stuff. There's also several other older batches, including Lunar Eclipse, which was started during one of the lunar eclipses over the summer last year. And this one is for protection during the dark hours. And then there is, sorry, this one, sorry, I'm pointing to Silver Mirror. Lunar eclipse is over here. Silver Mirror is about actually much more traditional Kyphi, which was burned in the evenings at the temple. I think the ancient pagan version of Vespers. And as the Kyphi was burned at night, it was believed to throw wide the doors of imagination and to open the gates of dream and to make living people more sensitive to spirits and gods and the communication from the other side, and also to feed and invite those beings so that we could commune as the day turned to night and be able to communicate effectively. So it was at once a sacrament and an offering and also a magical working. So it's a fun thing. And yeah, thank you for folks who are posting the links in there because I dare not touch it. I don't want another day where I just sit here banging my head against the screen because it doesn't work so well. But I mean, honestly, this is busy work, so occasionally I'm going to be sitting here doing this. But honestly, it's just like let's hang out. I don't know about you guys, but like my blood pressure and pulse are up a little bit because I was sitting there just doom scrolling and watching everything and seeing like senators and representatives post that they were sheltering in place, that there were bomb threats, that they were being evacuated. And I know not everybody on here is in the US, but this is a hell of a day. It's not like we didn't know some funky stuff was coming, but it's a little nerve-wracking. You can tell, like all of the hairs on my arms are standing up. I'm psychic. That doesn't mean I'm going to make predictions about what's going to happen. That doesn't mean I don't see some possibilities. But those possibilities are so entangled with my own emotional involvement because this is the place that I live in. This is the place I grew up in. I care deeply about it. I've been invested in US politics since I was very, very tiny. I was brought up in a family that was very involved and like believed in like raising your voice and making noise when you didn't agree with something. So I won't prognosticate. I'm just gonna hang out with y'all and try to get by because I'm far from DC. I've got friends out there. I've got friends who work in government, and we don't know what tomorrow will bring. We never do. But you know, today's a harder day than usual. But I love you all, and I know everybody's having. It's just been a rough time. Oh, Robert, yeah, like we all had to, like the 80s. Yeah, like, oi, so many things. Sorry, I'm not trying to like strip on camera, but I put this on and it's actually annoying me. So, uh, uh, yeah, I think if you just placed the order this morning, we haven't shipped it out yet. Illyria has gone to the Cuyahoga Valley National Park to do what Illyrias do best when they are stressed, which is to run for 20 miles just because they can. That is not something I, as a child who had like multiple heart surgeries, can actually do. So I make stuff instead. Yeah, it's like I feel there were moments in the summer where it felt like I was, attached to a Van de Graaff generator or a TENS unit. Like you could just like feel the prickles all on the wrong side of your skin. And it had kind of calmed down. And today is one of those days. Last night was one of those days where it became, a little bit much again. That uncertainty and that spark of violence, and that's also why I wanted to channel it into something intended to harness those sparks and the chaos and the destruction for the promise of coming out the other side, of being able to take all of that energy and transmute it into hope, into renewal, into rebirth. So Kyphi is a weird type of incense. I'm gonna yank off a bit here. So it is made with a base of dried fruit and honey and wine, and it's not self-lighting. It's not incense like we're used to. It is very resin heavy. It has a very low melting point, low burning point, and with all of the honey and other sugars and things in it, it scorches easily. So you need to warm it up a little bit like you would a wax melt, more than you just dunk it on a burning charcoal. I've heard from folks who have used charcoals that if you're careful and you burn the charcoal and you let it kind of like ash down to the point where it's no longer like super red hot, you can put the Kyphi on like a little piece of tin foil and you'll get a decent result. Several other people have used those little like soapstone warmers where you put a candle on the bottom and it's got like a little cup, and it will do the thing where it like releases the scent that way. I've had the best personal luck with things that are called bakur burners, because this type of incense, or at least a similar type of incense, is still used throughout the Middle East. And it's called bakur, where it is tightly packed resins and wood powders, very precious ones like sandalwood and agarwood. And rather than lighting them on fire and burning them to ash, you just like slowly warm them, usually to between 150, 190 Fahrenheit. It varies from batch to batch. You kind of got to play around with it a bit, but you slowly release it. Bakur burners come, several of them with like dials that you can control. And they price between 20 bucks and 70 bucks. I've seen them as high as like 125. I wouldn't go that far, but they are definitely something that you can pick up. And failing that, a hot plate will work just fine. Something that lets you've got a metal surface, you have control over the temperature, and you can put a little piece of tin foil or like one of those little, like the tin that little tea lights come in, or like those little like cups that wax melts sometimes come in. The only thing that really doesn't work is most of the things that are made for wax melts do not get hot enough. All they do is make your Kyphi really sticky. Uh, I was gonna look into a mug warmer, to see like mug warmer hot plate combos that are supposed to keep like your tea and your coffee warm. I mean, as long as they have a setting that lets them get to like 150, 160 degrees, they might be able to do it. They will be slow. Having experimented with burning it, like if you start off with something and you just set it to like 180, 190, you start to get the smell fairly quickly. If you start out at a lower temperature, 150 to 170, like it takes a little bit to get there, and then it's just slowly permeating your space. It's a pungent enough and subtle enough incense that one of the things that I recommend to people is, you don't even have to burn it. These are some of my little like giveaways. Just keep it in a permeable little sachet and put it in like your clothing drawer. The ancient Egyptians didn't only use it as a temple incense. It was also used as a medicine. It was used as a breath freshener, so it's edible, but I don't recommend it because there's some stuff in there that like tastes really funky. And what the Egyptians considered safe back in, say, 3000 BCE may not be what we consider safe now. So, just don't. But breath freshener, medicine, clothing freshener, like it had multiple applications. Anywho, oh yeah, by the way, this is from one of my favorite geeky t-shirt companies, shirtpunch.com. They do like special runs of things. So I get updates like every couple of days of like what's their daily deal, and they do like 4 different things from different artists. Everything, pretty much everything weird and geeky and funny. So from horror to Doctor Who to I've got some Lord of the Rings stuff. I discovered them when I was watching Hannibal because they were one of the only places that was doing Hannibal stuff. Oh yeah, no, I'm not talking about ignoring stuff. I'm just saying like, hey, come, let this just be a place to find our calm for a few moments. Do something else. One of the hard things about big changes like this in the world and unrest like this in the world is uh, those of us like what can we feasibly do? Um, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of work that we can do. Like we can write to our representatives. We can donate to causes. We can have hard conversations with family members who've been like sucked in by QAnon or ridiculous propaganda. We can do a lot of little things. But when it comes to the point where there are people evacuating the Capitol building in DC, when there are bomb threats, when there's the kind of stuff that's going on, we can watch it. We can make ourselves sick by watching it, or we can just take a few minutes, think about what we ideally want out of the world. Like, what is the picture of the world we want to live in? And in quiet moments, how can we bring that around? Like what is an actual productive, practical thing that you or I can do? I mean, I have a platform, so I feel obligated to boost signals and raise things and like occasionally sound off and just try not to talk out of my ass, but at least tell the world this is not right, this is not fair. Because people tend to hear that coming from an account that's got a magic little blue check mark. But when I was in 5th grade, this is how big in politics I've been since I was tiny. In 5th grade, I organized a petition through my entire elementary school because it was when President Reagan sat down with Mikhail Gorbachev and they were going to talk about nuclear armaments. And I kind of wanted to live in a world that was not a cinder nuked to the Stone Age. And I understood enough about that. I mean, I was in school at the time when we were still doing drills, not only for tornadoes, but for nuclear attack. Like I got in on the tail end of that where you're like ridiculously told to like hide under your fucking desk, like that's going to do anything. But portions of the school were marked clearly as bomb shelters. And there were radiation signs and like things that told you, like every day you walked past this thing and told you that if you walked down these stairs and went past this and closed that door, like you were in an area that was shielded from radiation. Like that was part of my lived experience growing up. So I had some opinions about whether or not we should keep making nuclear bombs and pointing them at one another during the Cold War. So I did a petition, and I got a bunch of people to sign it. It's funny looking back at it. Like if we'd had the internet back then, if we'd had like crowdfunding and everything, I think it would have been a much bigger deal than it was. Sent it off. Got really, really pissed off and disappointed because I never heard anything back. Like I put all this work into it. I got people to sign. Like it was a big deal for me. I thought that I was like making a difference. Foolishly thought that people were going to listen to a 5th grader in the first place. Around about when I was in college, I get a letter from Pennsylvania Avenue, the old name of a familiar address, and it's from Bush. And clearly they'd gotten my petition, and some poor intern was slotted to respond to it. So in the name of George Bush Sr., they wrote back to me and thanked me for my concern in the environment. Nothing about nukes, nothing about the summit. Many, many years too late. Uh, it was a valuable lesson. uh, Sometimes big attempts to make change uh, just don't get listened to. It's the smaller things, it's the grassroots stuff. Like, I made a bigger difference by talking to my classmates and getting them to think about the thing that we were signing than I could possibly have made by sending that. Even if I walked up to the state building myself, even if I'd gone to DC and like nailed this to the wall, um, I made a bigger difference by talking to people and making them think about it. Friends, and putting a personal face on it, not just a policymaker's face on it. So that's my politics story. Anyhow, yeah, just, hey, don't argue with if somebody's make it. Try not to be nice. Don't argue. Um, if somebody's poking you and making you feel defensive for me, don't defend me. It's okay. Like right now, just chill. Like it's okay. We'll get through this. We'll get through this. And I'm not yelling at anybody. Like, I really appreciate that fire for like trying to stand up and speak out, and I really appreciate like trying to defend. But for this right now, let's take a break from it. Nobody's ignorant about what's going on. Like, we know stuff is going on. We know the world is changing around us, more rapidly right now than maybe at other times, at least if you live in the US. And sitting there and just doing this isn't going to help us. Like I said, my lesson from doing the thing in 5th grade was I made a bigger difference by talking to friends, to family, than I possibly made by doing this big fancy petition. So start there, start small, start with the things that you can do. But for the course of this stream, let's just start with the Kyphi. So this is, everybody always asks me like what the ingredients were, and the Phoenix blend, Kyphi ordinarily has a little cinnamon in it, but also cedar wood, sycamore wood, that would be ground wood of the sycamore tree, or sycamore fig, not the sycamores that we have in the States. Completely different variety of tree. In honor of the Phoenix and the myth, I added, basically, instead of sycamore fig, it's got double the amount of cinnamon. So it's got a slightly like warmer, like that earthy spice. The cinnamon is not overpowering, but it is definitely a strong note here, mixing with the frankincense and the myrrh and all the other things that get stuck in here. As you can maybe see from some of the already rolled pieces, because this is hand rolled, in order to make sure that they don't stick together, they get dusted with, I normally use just a little bit of benzoin, which is a precious gum that has a kind of sweet vanilla smell to it. And it appears in some Kyphi recipes, not all of them, but it pairs well with everything else. It's also something that was like highly prized in the ancient world. And in the case of Phoenix, I have added just a little bit of Vietnamese cinnamon, which is my favorite cinnamon that we can currently get our hands on, to the benzoin powder, so that when you first initially burn the Kyphi, there is definitely like that hint of cinnamon lingering on the air. Now obviously, like if any of these ingredients are things that you're allergic to, I apologize, and you probably won't be able to use the Kyphi. If you do pick some up, like I said, it's hand rolled into these little dubers here, but it's okay to pinch them off and use even smaller pieces. If you are experimenting with, I don't know if the thing that I have to heat it up will work, Rather than like waste an entire piece, because this stuff is very expensive, very precious, just pinch off a tiny little bit, just a little bit, and put it on there and play around with the heat settings until you hit something that feels and seems comfortable for you. The other thing that I recommend is they come as little balls, and there's symbolic reasons for that, but also because it's just easier. But if you pinch it and squish it down so it's flat, like you've got more surface area, you get a lot more scent released all initially, and it lingers a lot better. The fun thing is Kyphi has 2 lives, and I spent some time trying to make sure that this is absolutely true. So when you heat it up and you release the scent like the first time while it is still like this sort of soft gummy stuff, you get this sweet, deep, complex, nuanced scent. But there's a point where the Kyphi gets kind of dark and hard. You'll know it goes from looking a little bit like brownie batter or fudge to looking like a hard candy. It's not done yet. Let it cool, take it off the heat, break it up, grind it up. And now that spent Kyphi can be burned much more like traditional incense, loose incense that we use in the States and whatnot, and burn it directly over charcoal. That version, you get a lot more smoke. You get smoke, a fair amount of white smoke. The first version, one of the benefits as somebody who has asthma, is you don't get a lot of smoke when you're just heating it up. You get more scent and maybe a tiny little curl of smoke, but nothing that's really going to trigger mild to average allergies. If you've got like very, very severe breathing problems, very, very severe asthma, I can't vouch for it, but I can say that first way of releasing the scent of Kyphi doesn't trigger my allergies, and they've been getting worse and worse the older I get. The second version, when you take the spent Kyphi, you break it up and you burn it, and you can burn it directly on a charcoal. There is a lot of smoke, and it will be familiar to anybody who uses loose incense. It has a different scent at that point. It falls back on a lot of the frankincense and myrrh and the resins. The other thing that you can use with that spent Kyphi is you can use it as a spell component. You can use it in little spell bottles or sachets, whatever it was made for, like the protection during the dark hours, the phoenix for rejuvenation, rebirth. You can add it to any of your own crafting. The protection from the dark hours, sorry, protection during the dark hours. You could take some little crumbles of that and just put them across like the thresholds of your home and continue to use the magic and the intent. And yeah, it is available as of today to the public, the Phoenix. You can also find lunar eclipse and silver mirror. You can tell I'm agitated about the news because I can't find the right words while I'm talking. I'm all over the place. Yeah, it's still hot. Don't touch it. I try to make sure, like, because, well, I mean, this is something so old it is new again. And the recipe that I work with, the one that is on the walls of the laboratory room in the Temple of Edfu in Egypt, that one dates to the dynasty of the Ptolemies. So that's a little over 2,000 years old, to give you some context. There are much older recipes, but the reason I use that one is it's one of the only ones that's come down to us with the actual measurements. Now, granted, those measurements took a lot of math to kind of like number crunch and theory craft, because first of all, they were not in cups or ounces. They're in a completely different measurement system, but also they were making batches for the whole fucking temple. And so you're looking at pounds of frankincense and pounds of honey and just a ridiculous amount of stuff, all of which has to go in this specially unlined cauldron. And the chemical reaction with the copper is an important part of making it, and steeping it and letting the mash like age over all of these successive days is an important part of it. It's just a lot. I'll be honest, I sell it mainly because I enjoy making it, but so much time and so much money goes into it that like, and I can't, because of the smallest batches I've learned how to make. And I'm never going to go through all of it. I like experimenting. So you guys get to benefit from my experiments. Oh, Time Bandits. Oh shit. That's for fuck. Yeah. Oh man, you guys are all geeks like me. I love that. Geeks of a certain age. Catching that late night out here in Ohio, we had a channel called WB WUAB Channel 43. And it was where we had like all of the weird monster films late night and the Saturday matinees with Superhost. Just fun times. Fun times. I think I might need a bigger thing to dust this in. I'm not sure if I got one readily at hand. But I don't want to leave the stream, so we'll just roll stuff and I can dust it as I go. Krista, where do you recommend purchasing the burner? Where do I recommend purchasing the burner for the Kyphi? Attar Mist, ATTARMIST, is a company that sells Bakur burners. The best burner that I've found so far is actually from, it's a Japanese import, and I've only found it available through Mermaid Magical Arts. They spell mermaid, M-A-D-E, and magical with a K. So Mermaid Magical Arts has an electric burner. Now theirs is also the priciest. It is like nearly $70, I think. It is a lovely burner. It is like black porcelain with this gold lotus design. It comes with a dial, so you can dial in like how hot or how cool that you want it to be. Plugs in, easy cleanup. They usually send a bunch of free samples too. And their stuff, I recommend their stuff. They've got some really awesome blends. But like I said, that one's on the high end for price. I should probably just do like a video and like a little article and post it, I don't know, to Medium or something, doing the reviews. Because at this point, I've bought easily 15 different types of things to see what do I burn the Kyphi on, because this stuff is weird and it's very finicky. And you know, at this point, we've gotten used to, you get a self-letting charcoal, you fire up the charcoal, you put the charcoal on some sort of heat-resistant thing, and then you know, you sprinkle your incense on it, and there's a lot of smoke, and voila. And if you do that with Kyphi, what you end up with is smelling a lot of burnt sugar. It scorches and it does not smell good. Like I said, the base is dried fruit and honey and wine. Most recipes talk about raisins, but there are other recipes that also talk about figs, dates. I've used all of them. This particular batch, Phoenix, is mostly Smyrna. I think that's how you pronounce it, Smyrna figs, and exactly 4 Deglet Nur dates. And the idea was 1 date for every year and no more years than 4. And you can fill in the blank for who that was aimed at. Hello, hello, Morgan Xena Bloodstorm. Yeah, the stone incense burners, like I said, some people have had good results with the little stone incense burners that have a little tea light under them. I've bought a couple of those, some that are stone, some that are metal. One thing that this has opened me up to was I had never heard of Bakur, and so I started making Kyphi, and didn't even know that that style of incense existed. And it's fascinating. Some of it's a little overpowering. If you can find Bakur that is like 100% like natural essential oils and natural woods and natural resins, but I found some of the ones that are made more with fragrance oils are just, they do not agree with me. They may agree with you, but I'm allergic to almost everything under the sun. So if it's not, especially like chemical stuff, like I have bad reactions to a lot of chemical things. I am a delicate flower, all 6 feet of me. This one has uh, an herbal woodsy aroma as the middle note. There's the warm cinnamon kind of carrying everything through. Uh, the I have different varieties of frankincense. Yes, I got that fancy with this stuff as I started to source things from different places. I started to try different varieties of frankincense. So Boswellia carteri, Boswellia serrata, and everything else in between. It's been a fun like rabbit hole to go researching down and just finding this whole realm of stuff. So Phoenix has Boswellia serrata and also a variety of frankincense that is my all-time favorite of all the ones that I've tried now, called Mahogany Gold. It was sold by a company called Wild Tree Essentials. And while I used to recommend them repeatedly on the streams, the downside with Wild Tree Essentials, this is actually kind of tragic. It's a small company, a husband and wife, or partners anyway, and they both caught COVID. Now they recovered, but in the course of this long, very taxing illness, they spent some time reassessing how their company had kind of like gotten away from their initial concept, their initial roots of like being very, very small. Like everything would ship, there was no plastic packaging. Like they would ship you these big hunks of frankincense in muslin bags. Like it was kind of like getting a shipment from the past. It was really cool. Well, they Hojari frankincense, this high quality, clear green frankincense that is usually harvested from the country of Oman, is the creme de la creme of frankincenses. It is widely used in homeopathy and in actual medicine and in a whole bunch of different things, many different applications. People chew it and eat it and burn it and add it to supplements, and it costs an arm, a leg, and a left testicle. Like it is not a cheap frankincense. It's one reason I don't stick it in the Kyphi, while many of the things that I'm putting in here are $60 a pound, $120 a pound. The green hojari and the black hojari was a little bit too much, too rich for melting into something like this. But the long story short with Wild Tree is they decided to only specialize in hojari, in like the highest grade of frankincense possible, which means I don't actually know anymore where to get all the fun varieties because I can't drink wine. I'm allergic to alcohol. That's a whole long story. Um, let me just say that my 20th birthday was kind of disappointing as a result, because that's a rite of passage, and that just led to anaphylaxis, and that was not fun. Um, but so I kind of turned into like a wine snob only for frankincense. Mahogany Gold has got like this rich, like deep amber color to it. It's clear. You get like little bits of the like tree bark because frankincense, like many of the resins, like they are harvested from trees. It's like pine sap, like it's the stuff that the tree weeps in areas where the bark has been scored. So basically, it's either tree tears or tree blood, sort of the same thing. Um, but Mahogany Gold and Boswellia serrata are the versions that went into this, and then myrrh, which gets even more extra and is more expensive. I used, I've never found it since, but it was a variety of myrrh called Kua that was harvested from a specific island. And why get so fussy and particular with it? In the same way that different vintages of wine will be distinguished by what growing season was like and by what type of grapes you used to make the end product. The same goes for this incense, where you're creating this piece of time over 10 days. You have to let it age for 3 to 6 months in most cases. This one aged a little faster. and cured up to firmness for two reasons: because it is drier here in the winter, and also because I upped the resin proportion to the dried fruit proportion, so it was a little bit less gummy. Um, but as you're putting all of these different things in, like each ingredient counts. Where it came from, where it was growing, how it was treated, what part of the plant it was harvested from. Is it like grade A? Is it grade D? Like all of those things add into it. And these layers of smell and scent and intention are built up until you have this end result that is a complicated melange of all of these things. And I found it really does make a difference which type of frankincense you use. You have a different note, you have a different scent, in the same way that a Shiraz is not the same as a Chardonnay or a Riesling, for that matter. Can't drink it, but I know about it. Tonight is tonight another blue moon? I mean, I know that blue moons are like if we get a full moon twice in 1 month. Could be a super moon, but again, I am not an astrologer nerd. Like with that. Illyria is much more on the astronomy end because her mom was an astronomer and her grandmother was an astronomer. Actually, they were kind of astronomer powerhouses. Let me brag for a minute, because Illyria never talks about this. And I don't know about you guys, I come from dirt fucking poor Irish immigrants, and then the French side of the family that I didn't get to meet until I was in my 20s. So like the best I got is grandma was psychic and Aunt Rita talked about fairies. So, that's what I got for heritage. And Uncle Jim probably worked for the mob. Again, Illyria's grandmother was a woman named Dr. Vera Rubin. We have so much of her stuff, her letters, her journals, the things that she's left behind, pictures of her. Look her up. Dr. Vera Rubin is the scientist who discovered and proved the existence of something called dark matter. Like, she had a huge impact on the world of physics and astronomy and all of these things. She's got Wikipedia pages and encyclopedia entries. There's just all of this cool stuff about her. She was the first woman in most observatories. Like, they didn't have a woman's bathroom in these observatories because they never assumed that there would be a woman astronomer in them. She has, I believe, had an observatory named after her recently. She is a fucking rock star. And Illyria is just kind of like, oh, well, I organized my grandma's desk, and it's just like things get normal because it's just, who the person really is. Her mom, who we know as Joyous Judy Young, Dr. Judith Young, worked at University of Massachusetts. And there is a sunwheel installation at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. And that sunwheel is a set of standing stones that were built in the style of the standing stones from the Orkneys to Stonehenge to Chaco, with like the sun dagger, the different stones and stone constructions that were meant and built as calendars, as timekeepers, things that allowed you to note when the solstices were and throughout the year, like Newgrange and whatnot. And so Illyria's mother made the standing stones at the University of Massachusetts. So if you're ever there, you were standing in part of a heritage I've inherited, and in a place that I've gotten to be because Illyria was like growing up with putting that together. Like so much of her life and her childhood are tied up with those stones. It's really cool. And like all of these trips, there are so many pictures and photos around here. Like, we've got photos from observatories with like super powered telescopes, photos of galaxies, of like just a big spiral armed galaxy, like long before Hubble, when it's like done through a weird process. Her mother would travel and basically chase eclipses and different phenomena. So there's all of these like diamond ring photos and full eclipse photos, and just it's such a cool heritage. But anyway, all of that to say, I'm not an astrologer, so I don't know if I don't think that there would be a blue moon this early in January. The last blue moon, didn't we have one? We had one in December too. Because I was going to make another batch of Kyphi right on New Year's Eve. And I don't know about you guys, but I just kind of like hit a point where I was like, what I want to do right now is game and hide from the world. So that was December for me. Uh, uh, oh, oh, Maeve, I'm so sorry. What's the best way to control things? I mean, and it's and more than just, how to control the darkness inside of yourself if you identify as a vampire, but just how to control anything that you're struggling with. The first steps, and they are the hard steps, are spend some time with yourself. Analyze what triggers you, not in like a, oh, I'm triggered sort of way that has become kind of trite, but like what pushes your buttons. Are there certain times of the day, certain times of the month, certain times of the year? Like, because there's a lot of variables that affect our mood, that affect how we respond to magic and the realm of spirit. Are there certain places? Are there certain people that bring things out in you? Are there certain situations? At which point, when you identify what pushes those buttons, what brings out the parts of you that you would prefer to have more control over, the first step at that point is to first remove yourself from the things that push you to a place where you don't have control. So you work on control under safe situations, under controllable situations, where you know where the variables are, where you can get a good sense of like, what are your limits? And as someone who's wrestled with this, I also recommend, if you have a safe place and have at least one safe, very trusted friend, lover, family member, doesn't matter, a person that you trust to watch your back, who can play spotter for you. Think of spotters as the person who, if you're doing like, if you're lifting really, really heavy weights, you want someone there who can also handle the weights, who can help you if you get in trouble, who can prevent you from like, here you are bench pressing and it's actually too much and now, and you don't want that bar across your throat. You want someone there to be able to help you out. So, and it's somebody you need to be able to trust, to have your best interests in mind, to have enough oomph to control the situation if it has gotten out of hand. If you have that, and you have the luxury to set some time aside to actually allow yourself to go all the way in, to actually lose control for a little while, so like to really explore and plumb these things that you're afraid of, these things that come out at inconvenient times, because it's not enough to set boundaries around it. It's not enough to recognize that if I'm over here, I'm more likely to have it happen. You need to know why it happens. You need to know the extent to which it could happen. You need to know both the depth and the power, and also how some of that it's not inherently bad. It's just bad depending on when it comes out and how it comes out. It's bad if it has no control, no direction. There's an incredible font of power in darkness, in rage, in fury, even in pain. So taking some time where you can set a space where you have someone you can trust and you can just really spend time with it, get to know it, claim it, reclaim it, learn how you harness it, recognize when it is okay to allow some of this out and how much. Recognize when you really need to keep as much control as possible. And for me, that control feels like floodgates, and not just one floodgate, but like multiple gates. Like, there's this, oh my God, this is going to sound so cheesy, but have you ever watched the anime Hellsing? I know it's silly and I know it's cheesy, but one of the benefits about pop culture is they give us really relatable, very vivid symbols to go, I know that this is not literally true, but this is something I can relate to. In Helsing, Dracula, I mean, we know he's Dracula, right? Basically has all of these different bindings on him, all of these different sigils that represent those bindings. And there are points at which he'll unlock deeper and deeper and deeper levels of that, depending on the situation. Take that idea, bindings on yourself. I think it's helpful to not think of them as bindings, but to think of them as levels of control and have layers of it, and also have points at which, in this situation, it's okay for me to open the floodgates to this part of who I am. In this situation, it's okay for me to open the floodgates to this part of who I am, because the situation calls for it and there is power there. And there are times when you want to be able to hold as much of it in as possible. The other thing that's helpful is to have a support system, to have people who don't hate you or fear you for what you are, but who see you for what you are, who value you for what you are in all of the good, the bad, and the scary, who you trust to give you useful and helpful feedback. If you are getting out of control, if you are behaving in a way that's scaring them, that doesn't seem okay, but also people who help you love your monster. There's a lot of power there. And I think the biggest problem with any of us who have a dark side is rejecting it or fearing it or thinking that somehow we always have to keep it in a box. And my experience is with any of our monsters, with any of our dark sides, the longer you keep it in a box, the stronger and wilder it gets, and the more likely it is to come out in a way that's not controlled. So learn to dance with your monster. Learn to make poetry with your monster. Learn that that is you, that that's a part of you, that there's nothing inherently wrong with it. The only point where it becomes wrong or harmful is when we allow it to come out in ways that hurt other people, when the situation does not call for that level of ferocity. So I hope that helps. Which is also why, hey, I am all of the things that I am. And you don't necessarily get to see all the ferocity on things like this. But it's not like I pretend it's not there. Yeah, love your monster. I make no secret of the fact that I started off in, and I still am involved in, and still identify as with the vampire community. Like, that is a significant part of my personality, my path, my reality. And I think one of the worst things, because when we use the word vampire or word witch or any of it, like, these are archetypes, these are symbols, they are culturally informed, they have an objective reality, but that reality is also shaped and colored by the stories that we tell, by the movies that we see, by everything from Helsing to Bram Stoker to the actual folkloric roots where these things come from, to the hidden mysteries in the past, that little grain of truth that clearly weaves through all of that, to your lived experience, your unverifiable personal gnosis, which means that the stories we internalize about the things we identify with, whether it is, are you a good witch or a bad witch? The idea that witches are either good or bad, rather than witches are people who have power and then who make choices. Think about how the stories and the representations of these very potent symbols color our assumptions about how they should be and how they should be behaved, or how they should behave, and then how that colors us when we adopt those symbols for ourselves as identity. With the vampire community, especially in the 80s and 90s, what I felt was, 70s, honestly, as well, what I felt was really detrimental was the idea that the Barnabas Collins vampire, and I'm going, throwing way back, you had Christopher Lee's Dracula kind of presented to people in a vast pop cultural way, but he was always a monster. He always had to be overcome in the end. Everything that he brought to people, the sort of like sexual, like very openly sexual realization and freedom that he would inspire in any of the women that he bit or any of the men that he bit, like that had to be suppressed. Like there's a whole message there that is very indicative of the time period. And then you have Barnabas Collins, who is still a monster, but he is the humane monster trying to fight against his darker side. And there's all of this angst and there's all of this guilt, and it is just, well, what it does is it makes anybody who identifies with the idea of vampire take onto themselves this sense that in order to be a vampire, I must be struggling with my darkness. I must resist. I must feel guilt. I must be weirdly Catholic, or maybe a vampire with a Jewish mom. Like I have to sit in a corner and feel bad about myself. And it Forever Night was another thing that built on that trope of he's trying to pay back to humanity all the terrible things that he did. But all that does is give people guilt and shame woven in with this identity that is a powerful, dynamic identity that is way more than just that stuff. So one of the most detrimental things to our community is like all the baggage that comes with the symbols that we adopt, the identities that we adopt. It's not like we think that we are literally Dracula. I have slept in a coffin. I'm not going to pretend I haven't. It's fun. It was part of a theater production, and it was the best way to get people to leave me the fuck alone if I was napping between scenes. But anyway, when we adopt an identity as sort of like a spiritual archetype, it's a structure that we hold around ourselves that allows us to better manifest like the authentic magic that is in us. But we have to be careful about that structure because it comes with as many downsides as it does things that open up possibilities. So we need to be aware of the things that we're internalizing. We need to be very discerning in what we allow to be internalized. And I would say that the guilt and that struggle with the dark side is something that we should leave behind. Instead, take the approach that there is power in darkness, there is power in ferocity, there's power even in all of it. And it's just a matter of how you choose to apply it and when you choose to apply it. So I will stop my soapbox as I'm sitting here rolling my little bits of Kyphi. Oh, Dr. Fives. Yeah, see, I'm also a horror nerd. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, the Louis versus Lestat. Like, I mean, Lestat gets a little bit too much where he's just like, ha, I am like the de facto narcissist. Fear me. And also he gets real weird with lately the later books and whatnot. And Louis, who's just can't get over himself. Don't be Louis. I mean, if you're my age, Lacroix is a much better indication. I mean, maybe a little on the side of being a monster, but he doesn't pretend that he's not what he is. Although, not to give you spoilers, but it's an old enough show that I suppose it doesn't matter. The real monster in that show is Lacroix's daughter. I think a lot of our modern culture, kind of fixates on anger is bad, ego is bad. You need to sit in a corner and feel bad about being upset, about raising your voice, about using your power. And I kind of see a lot of that as a holdover from when various religious institutions basically wanted to make us feel guilty so that we would be controlled. And I don't think that there's inherently anything wrong with being angry. I think there's a lot of power there. I think it is, again, all in how you use it and all in how you express it. Anger gets shit done, man. Even a certain amount of applied violence gets shit done. It's a question of how. What limits do you set for yourself? What point do you set? What is your line in the sand for when you raise your voice at someone? Because trust me, if you never ever raise your voice, if you never ever hold your ground, if you never ever push back when someone has pushed you, that is actually more dysfunctional. Like that allows, well, frankly, look around. We know what that allows. There are points where we have to stand up for ourselves. There are points where we have to tap into our anger and our fury and our indignation and find ways to channel it in a productive fashion. Whether that is raising our voice, whether that is pushing back, maybe not through physical means, but at least through whatever means we have to take a stand, to stand up for what is right, to protect people who aren't able to protect themselves, to change the world. You know, the lesson of the phoenix, that change doesn't come without pain. I mean, this is a bird that in myth would gather branches of cinnamon and frankincense and myrrh and make a pyre and burn itself to ash in order to be renewed. That can't have been fun. Like the whole point is like in that moment of transformation, it's terrible. But you don't get to the other side unless you're willing to face that and harness it. These are the things I think late at night. Hey, Cassie Collins. Can I mentor? Oh, so I should probably let people know, like, I do a lot of teaching these days. And with 2020 and the pandemic, a lot of it's moved online. I used to be much more comfortable in person with people. I'm actually an introvert, probably not a newsflash to anybody. I'm sometimes a bit of a hermit. I felt incredibly validated when Greg Newkirk made the post that he did a couple of days ago, just mentioning that, like, you know, he gets kind of stuck in himself. He gets like lost in his own head. He withdraws. He has long periods of time where he kind of needs to be like poked and prodded to come out of his cave and actually interact with people. And I'm like, I feel this so hard. Like that is me. That is my life. I'm the same way. Um, and what impact that's had in the past on me in teaching is with stuff in person, I just, you know, would do a couple of classes and then hit a point where I retreat and then of course write and get sucked up into that. Long story short, say that a lot, I apologize. This past year, I have acquainted myself with technology like StreamYard and all of these sort of streaming things. And I have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/haunted. Uh, Pretty happy with having parked that one. And I do most of my classes and teaching and outreach there. Now, that's not to say that I only do teaching and stuff there. I grew up very poor. And when I was in my teens and I really needed it most, there was all of this financial gatekeeping. Like, if I wanted to know anything about vampires, like the only thing that was out there really was like the Temple of the Vampire. And they were pretty obviously, even then, like a pyramid scheme. Like, everything cost at the time for me an egregious amount of money that meant I either paid them for shit that really turned out to not mean anything, or I bought ramen that week to fucking eat. So I try to keep at least a few things up on my YouTube. I try to do streams like this and answer questions as they come up. And, you know, I try to make some stuff free and available because I really do believe that information needs to be shared. You know, we're in a really bad place politically because all of the vetted journalistic information is behind a paywall, and most people won't or can't pay for that. The information that's free, the widely free stuff, means that anybody who wants to control that free stuff and it's the easy access for folks. Like you can just put whatever out there. Anyway, so I don't like to put everything behind a paywall and just leave everybody to the wolves. But the Patreon, you can join for as much as little as $1 a month. I also realize that presumes that you have a credit card or a way to pay. That still gatekeeps to a certain extent because not everybody has that. Not everybody has internet connection. And there's only so much I can do at the moment with accessibility. But I'm working on it. I am so my thing has stopped scrolling. I'm a little worried that if I touch it, it's gonna. Okay, we're good. Okay, cool. Yeah, if you dig around on my YouTube, there is the Haunted Life series, and then there's some stuff I did with Resident Undead Paranormal, sitting down with my student Becca Kirschbaum and Annie Weebs and a couple of other folks, and just having conversations about things. There is a bunch of stuff that you can pick up on my website. We had a 50% off sale, but we stopped as of the first of the year. There might be another sale, but when I say that, like the classes, like it's $20, which these days is not nearly as much as $20 was when I was a freshman in college, trying to figure out like what do I do with the way my abilities work. Because although I had the pleasure of growing up in a family where psychic abilities were fairly normal and were talked about and were encouraged, we were encouraged to like understand and experiment. My abilities took a shape that was a little intimidating and not very well understood. And I spent some time really trying to figure that out. Not all of that was fun. Yeah, thank you, Emma. Yeah, Oni was. We're doing a follow-up class with Oni in February. I was going to do a class this month as well, but it's my birthday month. And when Illyria asked me what I wanted, it was the freedom to stream if I want to teach if I want to, but like no set schedule. Just let me be spontaneous. That suits my personality a little bit better. So this is the month of I get to do what I want. And I turned 48, y'all. How? It's funny. My mom died when she was 52, and she was 20 years older than me. So every birthday, I'm like, when my mom was this age, this was happening. I don't know if that works like that for anybody else. It whenever my birthday comes around, there's just I spend some time kind of sitting with it. I think about like, where am I? How am I doing? Have I accomplished? What have I accomplished versus what I thought I was going to accomplish? Like, where am I? Just kind of like a little personal check-in. And my mom is never far from my thoughts with that. I wasn't raised with a father, so it's not like he really came into the equation. I maybe know who my father is. Facebook is a weird thing, but it's not like we've done anything other than exchange like a couple of quick Facebook messages to go, hey, I'm Jane's kid, and you might be this person. I don't want anything. I just want like some confirmation, maybe. I don't know what I want. Hi. Actually, I do know what I want. Are there any weird physical things that I need to worry about? Because the open heart surgeries when I was a kid were plenty for me, and I don't want to have to look forward to anything worse. That's a whole lot of awkward, though, because apparently I have a bunch of siblings, half siblings anyway. They have no idea I exist, or at least they have no idea that I am related to them. So that's interesting. Sandy, that sort of stuff really makes the day. Um, Actually, that reminds me, like, I don't know that I express often, like, my idea of how do you change the world. Because again, like this series started with, there's some shit going down, especially if you're in the US, like today is a kind of stressful day. Like you're kind of like sitting on tenterhooks, wondering what's gonna happen. What can I do? What should I do? My personal theory on how you change the world is first you work on yourself. And that's not from selfishness. That's from everything you do, every person you talk to, every interaction you have, you change the world by tiny little increments. And if that change is accomplished by being authentically who you are, like showing people this is what a person like this is like. I don't hide, and not everybody has the luxury to be as out about everything as I am. And I know that like some of my privilege is the sheer fact that I am a very big person. I am tall, I am strong. So on the occasions that I have had a violent reaction from people around me, I've been able to handle myself. Not everybody has that as an option. So I'm not telling everybody to go out there and like be in people's faces. What I'm saying is find out who you are. Find out what's important to you. Um, these things can change. These things will evolve. They're not monolithic. They're not one and done. So it's sort of like a lifelong process of figuring this out. But do your best to just be who you are and what you are, and do what appeals to you. Don't do things only because they are what you are expected to do. Don't do things only because they are what you were raised to do. Don't do or believe things only because that's what everybody else around you has told you is right. Decide those things for yourself. And making those decisions means a lot of soul searching, a lot of hard questions, some dark nights of the soul, and also honestly a lot of courage, especially if what you want and how you want to be is very, very different from everybody around you. Peer pressure doesn't have to be a bunch of people like hovering behind you, telling you that you have to like smoke that cigarette. Peer pressure is honestly more effective when it's just, this is what everybody's doing. Think about the peer pressure of having a green lawn if you own a house. Everybody else, I live in fucking suburbia, so it's a thing. I live in suburbia in the Midwest. Everybody has a fucking lawn. I hate everything about lawn culture. I hate everything about like how this is terrible for the environment, like how it's terrible for bees, for just everything. I despise it. But actually breaking the rules, like those unstated rules, but very clear rules that if you have a house on this street, your lawn must look a certain way, and just tearing up all of the fucking grass and putting in like wild bits of um, wildflower mounds here and herb garden mounds there and a water course and just all of the stuff that's out there right now, that none of it is a fucking green lawn. uh, at first, like that was some sphincter clenching shit, because of course we've got like the one neighbor across the street who literally will spend hours every summer just standing at the edge of his driveway, staring, just staring at our yard, judging us, wishing that we would just like fall into some sort of, I don't know, I think he just hopes that the earth would open up and swallow us in our house because we are not proper in his way of looking at things. And Lord, he and his wife, they are just the biggest gossips. And I mean, not only because of the lawn, but the lawn is like a fucking thorn in his ass, or the lack of a lawn. So peer pressure is a bigger thing than like the, anyway. Huh. I'm not born to fit in your world. I was born to fit into mine. Karen, yes, that is pretty much. And like I said, I do recognize my privilege in, I had to deal with the fact that I was probably going to die before I was 5. Like this was part of conversations and regular conversations. Like I was introduced to the concept of mortality very, very early. Um, I had a lot of things happen to me as a kiddo because of the open heart surgeries and everything else. And so, that stuff like that either breaks you or it makes you stronger. And honestly, there's no either. Like it both breaks you and makes you stronger. And it's a matter of like, where does it break you and how do you recover? And for me, it gave me, when I came out the other end, a lot of strength. And really a huge, healthy, maybe heaping portion of gives no shits. Like I just don't fucking care um, about somebody's opinions, about working with broken systems, about doing things just because somebody thinks that that's what I should be doing. And that's totally, but it's certainly partly because of everything that I went through and the fact that like it became really obvious at a very early age, nothing is promised, nothing's guaranteed. Like none of that is going to earn you anything. um, Playing by people's rules, doing exactly what they expect you to do, uh, what does that get you? uh, if it's not what you actually want, if it's not functional, if it's actually hurting you, if it's actually hurting other people, fucking ditch that shit. Yeah, I will say that like as soon as they can complain about the dandelions when we still had dandelions, like the neighbor across the street is the guy who, if he's that guy who just like calls the cops for every reason he possibly can. When so this house is where House Keperu meets, or did before the pandemic. So we, 8 times a year we have a seasonal ritual, and then a couple of other times a year we have like little private gathers and rites of passage where people earn their first and second and third degrees. And like, so there's a bunch of people that come here. It's also why it's such a big house. Like if it was only a house for me, it would be much smaller. It would only be big enough for the books and me and cats. But as it is, I have a house where there's fucking beds everywhere. Like every room upstairs is basically a dormitory. So people will come, and we pack the house full of all the Keprians who could make it from Michigan and from Pennsylvania and from New York and all of the other places, and the folks from Canada. And we simultaneously have ritual and a sleepover and communal meals and just hang out and game and do magic and be social. Well, God help us that there's a bunch of fucking cars in our driveway. The dude across the street will immediately call the police because clearly we must be over here sacrificing goats. So every single time. And thank goodness, the only thing is my shirt is black, because I have no illusions that if things were a little bit different, some of my conversations with the police locally would go quite differently. And they still don't go very well because, again, I stick out like a sore thumb, and I'm definitely not a suburban housewife. I am way too queer and way too outspoken and way too weird. And there are probably a few too many skulls, gargoyles, and tombstones in my yard for anyone to think that I should live in this neighborhood. Certainly the local cops. So, I mean, it's not lost. I mean, what the dude across the street's trying to do. Like, he just wishes we would go away. It makes it fun to stay. Yeah, he's just not a good human being. Of course, I haven't brought it up. He is Christian. He's been like this since he invited us to come to his kind of sketchy church, and we turned down. And yeah, he's one of those people. Like, there's a lot of cool teachings in Christian theology. Like, there's in the original stuff. Like, if you read what that Jesus guy was trying to share with folks, there's some awesome stuff there. And I just don't know how they got so far off the rails. Not all of them, but some of them really like need to revisit that stuff and like really figure out what it's supposed to be to love your neighbor. Now, I will say, neighbors on both sides, are adorable. I don't know if you watch my Twitter account, but the neighbors over on this side, they got two kids, two girls. They're awesome, awesome kiddos to hang around with. And they had a dog, Gunner. Currently, they've got a dog, Corey, and two cats. Their cats are outdoor cats. Gunner would come over. He was a purebred German Shepherd, just the best boy. Smart, kind, everybody's friend, just this wonderful, wonderful animal. And he and my cat, Remy, the big black Maine Coon, had something going to the point where I had to like start actually locking the screen door to the front door because we live in a neighborhood where you don't always do that. Because both the cat and the dog knew how to open the screen door and would do so to let themselves hang out. So there's footage of like Remy and Gunner like just loving on each other, and Remy would just like roll over and flop for him, and Gunner knows his belly, and Gunner had to be put down in the summer. He was like 11, 12, like he was really old for a German Shepherd. Had hit the point where he couldn't quite walk. His kids were just really, but I love those. They are fantastic people. Throughout the pandemic, what I would do, and I started doing this for all of the kids in the neighborhood, at least on the cul-de-sac. Obviously, not me. Well, the mean guy across the way, he doesn't have kids anyway, but or he did. They all moved out, and I don't see them ever come back. I don't blame them. So when it came down to everybody being locked in for Easter, I had thought ahead, and I had bought a bunch of Easter candy and a bunch of like stuff. And I don't really like Easter's not so much a thing that I celebrate. I celebrate the day after Easter so I can buy fucking Cadbury cream eggs and Cadbury like the little chocolate mini eggs. Like that's my Easter celebration. But I know that that's important, and culturally like it's a big deal. And I also knew like there's actually about a dozen kids on the street, mostly girls, one little boy, Liam, just can't quite figure out why nobody wants to play soldier with him, but he's game for playing with everything now. He's an adorable kid. So for Easter, I got a bunch of plastic eggs, and I let all the parents know that the Easter Bunny was going to come around and hide eggs in their yards. And my neighbors, the good ones, were crying. I hadn't realized how hard it was actually to get like as you got closer to Easter. It was impossible to buy candy, to buy baskets, to buy any of it. I'd bought it like, way ahead because I try to do that for Halloween too. So anyway, that's how I was the Easter Bunny this year, or in 2020 anyway. I would totally come to, Spooky Sisters, and this is definitely, the fire has been lit under me by the pandemic. I've been meaning to make a trip to Britain and Scotland and Ireland and Wales. And I keep like finding a billion and one other things to do and just like, not doing it and whatever. And when all of this is over and we can actually travel, if you will allow someone with a US passport to come into your country, because I wouldn't blame you if you didn't, after all of our shenanigans, I very much want to make a trip up to Wales and Ireland probably first, because that's where I have the most actual like blood relative stuff. Nobody that I know, but ancestral lands that I have heard stories about. But I definitely want to explore everything up there and just, I don't know, see what it feels like. Yorkshire decaf tea is my favorite. Berries is also one that I am very, very fond of. I'm a tea snob. I'm covered in Kyphi. Oh, so what I'm doing with the little rolled bits is I am delicately rolling them in a mix of powdered benzoin with a little bit of Vietnamese cinnamon. And that's so that they don't stick together too much once I ship them. And had I been thinking ahead, I would have grabbed like a fork or something from downstairs so I could a little bit more comfortably pull them out of here. But, you know, so for folks who are new to the stream right now, what you see me doing is I am working on an ancient incense called Kyphi. Well, Kyphi is the Greek word for it. It was originally kapet in Egyptian, which just means incense. And it is also in Syriac called kupar. But whenever, if you, like me, you owned like that old Scott Cunningham book of incense and oils and whatnot, you probably saw him mention Kyphi and offer a possible blend for it. It's an incense that when I was in college and like super into like my witchcraft phase and like really exploring especially herbalism and crafting my own incenses, crafting like, you know, bath things and sachets and whatnot. Kyphi was this sort of like, I don't know, mysterious thing, and nobody quite knew what went into it. And everybody had a different blend, and all of them smelled a little wrong to me. And I found a book. Well, so I started doing this partly because of all the work I do with past lives. So I founded and am, well, not head anymore. I am the founder of, and basically the legacied advisor of a group called House Keperu. And I started that back in like 1996. And its initial start was as a soul group, people who felt connected through shared past lives. And there's a lot to that. And it's a lot more complicated than that, but it's also an energy work group, a magical group. It's been around since 96. It's called House Keperu. It is not by any stretch reconstructionist. It's not like we're trying to be Kemetic Orthodox or like any kind of like recreating Egyptian pre-Christian beliefs or anything like that. But there is a sense of a connection to some things back there. It's not the only place where any of us were ever incarnated, but there is definitely a sense to like an old temple structure. And given that, and given that scent is a very, very powerful memory trigger for memories in this life, for sure, but possibly also memories in past lives, I had been having a conversation with someone, we were just idly discussing what would it be like how would a past life regression go if you were aiming to remember like this certain time period, you were able to recreate some of the smells or sounds from that time period to kind of like help the immersion. And that led to me researching Kyphi. And there's a great book called Sacred Luxuries by Lise Maniche, Lisemanniche. And the book is Sacred Luxuries, which is a grand tour. It's a coffee table book, so there's lots of illustrations of ancient Egyptian perfumery, herbalism, medicine, and incense making. There's a whole chapter on Kyphi, and she collected as many of the surviving recipes as she could get her hands on and as had been translated. And I went through that and I got really excited. And in 2019, I made my first batch of Kyphi by the book, the way that you made it thousands of years ago. If you watched Haunted Salem Live and you were wondering what weird stuff I was standing over and like doing stuff to like, it was a batch of Kyphi that I made explicitly for that show. I couldn't use, they needed something that was going to have a fair amount of smoke. And so I made Kyphi that had a much higher resin. So more frankincense, more myrrh, more gum mastic, so that I could put it directly on a charcoal and it would burn a little bit more like traditional resin incense, so that it had that sort of camera appeal. And we used that to sort of open the gates and allow for spirit communication. I don't know if you got to see, but I then used an old scrying technique where an operator guides another person being used as a medium as they hold a bowl, a specially prepared bowl, and that bowl is full of water with a little scrim of oil on it. And there is low lighting, and the lighting, it makes kind of a scrying mirror in the bowl. And the purpose to having medium and then the operator is it allows, you know how I was mentioning, it's a good idea to, like, if you're going to indulge and like really just let yourself go, that you have a spotter. It gives a spotter to that. It lets the person who's doing the scrying and the spirit communication just let go. Not worry about holding boundaries, not worry about anything, just give themselves over to the experience, because as the operator, I'm standing behind them and I'm the one holding the boundaries. I'm the one making sure that nothing gets, like, crawls in that's not going to be okay. I'm the one making sure that this stays on the rails and stays safe. So this sort of, buddy system approach. And the person who I was able to give a fantastic experience to was none other than Jack Osborne, who never thought of himself as psychic. That's one of the cool things about that technique is the person just has to be willing to make themselves open. They don't have to think of themselves as psychic. There's no real training, because the training, it's the person behind kind of driving the car. So anyway, that's the first place that you might have seen. There was so much that did not make it to like what everybody actually got to see on TV. It was a really fun experience. A little part of it might have been frustrating, where I don't know if you got to see the sort of spirit board thing that went on, and where I basically had to do some psychic triage for a person who got very overwhelmed by what was going on. And that is all I'm going to say about that. That could have gone better. I would have been happy to not have to do that. Also, this batch is Phoenix. It was started on Samhain, Halloween of 2020. I started it just to be fun and silly at 11:33 p.m. my time on the night of a blue moon, and completed it, I think, 10 days later. And then it's been curing since. I was hoping that this one would be done curing a little early. I actually made it with a little bit more resin and a little bit less fruit, with the intent of having it ready at least by January 20th. So you can get an idea of like what I'm aiming for with the idea of Phoenix, rebirth, renewal, rising from the ashes. And it is live for sale as of today. It's on my website. So if you go to michellebelanger.com/incense or /Kyphi, I think. I'm sure somebody on there can help you with a link to it. And if you're curious about this stuff, like, I've got several articles up there. If you want to make it yourself, which I encourage, you're welcome to do so. I have recipes. I have a full ingredient list in every case. So like Silver Mirror has a slightly different ingredient list. Lunar Eclipse has a slightly different ingredient list. A couple of people have asked, why is the picture of the lunar eclipse so red? Because in that case, since it is about protection during the dark hours, and the lunar eclipse, actually, as much as it's a lunar eclipse, Kyphi, the idea was to bring very solar energy because of it's a long story, but it has a lot to do with the bark of the sun. So the boat of the sun in the underworld, and the survival of the sun during the dark hours. And so I've got a lot of solar tuned herbs and things added into it. And one of the things that I added was dragon's blood. So dragon's blood is what gives it its red color. And instead of being dusted in benzoin powder, the lunar eclipse is dusted in dragon's blood. Each of them have slightly different scents. All of them have frankincense and myrrh and gum mastic. So there's always going to be like that deep, warm, kind of piney, resiny smell as like the base of the scent. How do you absolutely make certain that you get it? Honestly, just pop on over. Well, first of all, as you can see, like there is a lot of this, and it's, you know, sitting here and like taking it and turning it into like pea-sized little bits. There are thousands of pieces in this little batch. So we will not run out of it anytime soon. And it's up there specifically. So each vintage of Kyphi is sold individually. So you can find Silver Mirror, and you can find Lunar Eclipse, and now you can find Phoenix. My original batch of it, which I made in 2019, hasn't been for sale for a while, but I will admit that I found a chunk of it kind of hanging out at Inspiration House. I think I'd pulled it over there when I was working on the version for Travel Channel. And there's not a lot, but I'm debating, because I'd already set some aside for House Kepperu. Like we've got a whole pot of it, in fact. This is our big Kyphi pot, which, you know, is a bean pot from World Market, but it looked cool and it's earthenware, and I just sort of like the feel of it. Also, it was on sale. So this has like our personal thing of that first batch of Kyphi. So I'm debating if I want to sell also like a very small run of Temple, and if I do, I will. Ancient Temple, sorry. Ow, ow. So the downside with rolling this stuff by hand and making it by hand and grinding it by hand is every once in a while there's still a sharp little bit that didn't get ground up, and I find it the hard way. I almost need a thimble. Yeah, we will be packaging all of this up and getting things out in the next day or two. It's also one of the reasons why like, I'm doing a live stream about it, so that like anybody who might be interested, you get to know about it, you get to go over, make the purchase right now, and then we'll just have all of the purchases at the same time. Because going to the post office has become a production. We no longer go to the one, well, we try to go to the one closest to Inspiration House, which is in Oberlin, Ohio. It's the haunted property that I own, because honestly, theirs is a little bit less busy all the time, and it's, well, you're more likely to find people wearing masks at that one. And I want to be able to get you all what you have ordered, but I also don't want to die. And yeah, I would prefer not to get COVID again. Yeah, I should. I've done Phoenix Rites before. I think one of my Phoenix Rites is still in the Vampire Ritual book. If you can't find that book for sale anywhere, I donated it to sacredtexts.com along with one of the early versions of the Vampire Codex. So, like I said, probably a half an hour ago, you know, I grew up pretty poor, and as much as I do sell certain things at this point, like I keep a Patreon, I have sliding scales for a lot of things. Like I do need to keep a roof over my head. It's nice to be able to eat, because this is what I do full time. I also strongly believe in making sure that there are useful things that are out there and free for people who can't afford that, who don't have credit cards, like for who are in the situation that I was in growing up. So sacred-texts.com is a fantastic internet resource. The fellow who founded it and who pioneered it has since passed on. He has several friends who carry it on in his memory. His idea was to create a website that freely hosted all of the sacred texts of the world. Like, if it was about religion, spirituality, mysticism, if it was an influential text, if it was connected to a new religious movement, he wanted, without judgment, to just put it at everybody's fingertips. I don't think it gets as much press as it should. It is a fantastic resource. If you are in a financial position to help support them, I highly recommend it. but if you're not, just go and you can read the Vedas, Bhagavad Gita. You can go through all the Tibetan stuff. You can learn about Baha'i. You can read stuff from the Temple of Psychic Youth. And they've got a whole Gothic section. So they've got my Vampire Codex, and they've got my Vampire Ritual book, which has a Phoenix Wright in it, if I remember correctly. And that was, when did he contacted me? Oh, maybe in 2000, I think. Because the thing about the Codex is the Vampire Codex, the first version came out in 1994. It's just, it was an underground publication. So it's not like it came out in any version that anybody had unless they like were directly purchasing it from me. So it was like, you know, self-published. Back in the pre-internet days, that was through zines and pen pal networks and stuff like that. I think the first couple of versions that made it online, and this dates me, showed up on AOL. Used to give you home pages for each of your account names. And so I had been trying to get the Vampire Codex published for years at that point. I have so many fucking rejection letters. Nobody wanted to touch it because it took vampirism seriously. It was by vampires for vampires. Everybody was still had their heads up their asses because of the satanic panic. And it was too dark. None of the witchcraft publishers wanted to touch it. Like it was a process. But you know, in the meantime, I felt that the information needed to be out there. So I had self-published versions and I had online versions. And so he reached out in 2000 and asked if he could host one of those versions. Now, I will warn you, the language is very rough. Well, I won't say rough. It's very high goth, I think, is the bit, because this is me writing. God, I started working on this stuff when I was 18. So this is me writing in my early 20s, and it is a voice that one of the things that I learned about trying to get the book published was that was not a voice that I could use for mainstream publications. I had to find a different way to pass that information along. It is partly also a product of its time. Some of the language will feel dated now, especially uses of like gendered pronouns and things like that. So please forgive me. It is a little darker, a little bit more honest about some of that in ways that I could not be with the Wiser edition that was published in 2004. There were things that I had to take out and things that I had to sanitize a little bit if I was going to get it published. But anyway, and the Vampire Ritual book was the cycle of rituals that I wrote for the Sanguinarium around the same time. So 99 to like 2001 or so. Old school stuff. Thank you again so much for putting the links up there, because I can't touch the screen at the moment anyway. Yeah, I really, really recommend it. Sacred Text has so many cool things. And another one, if you are somebody who has a fascination with magic, grimoires, you know, Renaissance magic and whatnot, Esoteric Archives is another really great site to just spend an afternoon going through everything that they have collected. That is Joseph Peterson's stuff, not to be confused with Jordan Peterson, two totally different human beings. And that one has, like, you know, all of the Key of Solomon material, the Goetic stuff. There's a lot of awesome stuff in Esoteric Archives. I have sourced it widely for the my Dictionary of Demons, because at one point, like, Esoteric Archives was the only place to find printed versions, readable, accessible versions of some of these. As things have changed and society has changed and what we consider acceptable has changed, Peterson has a bunch of things that are now, like, you can just hop up on Amazon or hop up on his website and get his translated version of the Grand Grimoire or the Red Dragon or any of the rest of it. I highly recommend his stuff. He is a brilliant scholar. He is devoted to the topics in a good, unbiased sort of journalistic way. He doesn't make anything more of it than it is. He is dedicated to like finding as much accurate information about it as possible. He's really not someone to perpetuate myth over fact, which is again why Esoteric Archives is a fantastic thing to cite. Okay, I don't know how many Illyria put up. I can poke at her and tell her to, well, she's walking. So end of day, there will be more put up just in case. Let me check. Oh, yeah, I can't. Fuck. Watch me try to use my phone with my knuckles. All right. Let's see. This will be fun. Do I have my website conveniently up in my tabs? No, of course I do not. Oh, wait, nope, I do. Yay. All right, let's see. Let me see if it has decided that it's already sold out. It's possible that Lyria did not put, like, maybe just like put like 20 or so up there, and it will be easy to fix. Oh, Lord, everything says it's sold out. Okay, it's not. Hang on. Here's where you get to see I do talk to text all the damn time. Hello, beloved, period. I know you are on your walk, comma, but at your earlier convenience, if you could add more to the incense shop, because we are showing as sold out for everything, period. And I am happily packaging more as we speak, period. Love you, period, bye, period. We'll have that fixed in just a little bit. So one of the reasons why she tries to only put like a certain amount up there is to make sure that we actually have it already rolled. Because as you can tell, rolling and preparing this stuff is not a small process. I usually do live streams when I'm making the Kyphi, when I'm doing the Kyphi boil, and when I'm rolling it because, well, let's be honest, this is a long, tedious process, and I might as well keep me and you entertained. Food safe love. So one of the reasons that I'm doing it with just my fingers and whatnot is when I first started making this, I decided I didn't, if at all possible, I wanted nothing synthetic, nothing modern, if possible, to be involved in the Kyphi. So it's boiled in an unlined copper pot that was made for that was like hand forged in Italy, and it's sitting here on a marble slab. This is marble. None of the measuring cups, everything is metal and unlined. Like I just try to make it as ancient as possible, which is also why I haven't been using like gloves or whatnot. Because I don't know, it doesn't make a difference. And let's be honest, like in the year of our internet 2021, the idea that we can keep plastic out of anything is probably a pipe dream, but I feel better about it. Oh, show me how you do that. Emergency spells to help the chaos. Can we get a few emergency spells to help chaos in our country? I'd posted like a quick little New Year's spell to kind of go along with the whole Phoenix theme. And here's what I'd recommend, here's pretty much the same thing, because I think you can use it more than just on New Year's. If you can do it, if you can burn something safely, get a strip or a couple of strips of paper and write down the things you want to let go of, the things that you want to see go away. Whether those are themes, emotions, attitudes, whatever, in a vessel that is safe. What I would ideally say is somewhere safe that you can burn something, but in like some tin foil so that you can easily collect the ashes. Light those one by one on fire. Let them burn. Let them burn down to ash, or as completely down to ash as possible. Once that's cooled, collect the burned bits of paper. Grind them up. Add just a little bit of water and make ink. It's not going to be fancy ink. It's not going to be ink that lasts for a very long time. But use that as ink, either as finger paint or with a very fine brush. Get some new pieces of paper. From the ashes of what you want to let go of, what you have burned, to symbolically remove from the world. Write down what you want to see rise from those ashes. Write down the better world that you hope comes from chaos and destruction and all of what we're going through. So that's my thought. I mean, because we are in an interesting time. And it is a time of change. It's a time of a lot of opportunities to like re-examine and rethink what the world is like and what we want out of it. I think some of the best places to start with that magic, start small, start local, start with yourself. I mentioned, like, I started this group, House Keperu, and as we so when we run ritual, and I wrote all of the stuff, so like it's my thing. We open ritual with something called the Keperu Charge. We close it with family prayer, mainly because actually, my idea about ritual is less about worship or gods or goddesses or anything like that. Like, ritual for me is an opportunity to step into a non-ordinary state of mind, to kind of bridge the gap from our ordinary life and step into the possible, to step into the metaphysical realm, to step into spirit and all of that. Or at least to hit a space where you can reach across and maybe bring those possibilities, that magic, that potential into your world and bring it back out once you move out of the ritual. To that end, I also don't like rituals that are hard scripted, that become just like this sort of rote thing that you do over and over and over again. And so I developed this idea that I called living ritual. And it's really, I don't think it's a revolutionary idea. It's in that moment, you have an idea of what you're doing, but allow room for it to organically happen. If in that moment you are inspired to change the narrative, to change the script, to say things, to sing things, to use different symbols than you ordinarily would, leave room for possibility to come in that moment, to allow ritual to be a space of inspiration as much as it's a space that you've constructed. Now, you do have to construct it. It's why witches and pagans and stuff cast a circle, like you're making a container. You're setting boundaries within which this realm of possibility, this sacred space is created. And those boundaries exist also to kind of hold the line against anything that would detract from that, anything that might invade it, anything that might pull you off kilter, so that you've got this quiet, sheltered space that is your focal point for whatever your intent is with that ritual. Part of creating that boundary, that container, I found, it does help to have some things that are familiar, that are habit, that you start with a bookend and you end with a bookend. And that's what the charge and the prayer are. They're the only things that we, aside from vows, that we recite word for word without much change. They are still allowed to grow and evolve. For example, the Keprian charge used to, the family prayer used to always say, like, we've been many things to one another, brothers, lovers, friends, and bitterest enemies. And, as things have changed and as the world has moved forward, I've changed that to teachers, lovers, friends, and bitterest enemies. Partly because teachers scans better, but trying to add in like brothers, sisters, non-binary people, like it was too much of a mouthful to stick in there. So just removing the specifically like binary language. So allowing for growth and evolution with that, but having some structure, and then within the space of that structure, inside it, allowing for spontaneity, allowing for inspiration, allowing for something to just well up from your throat, and each person standing in that space and participating in that ritual to just speak whatever is true for them in that moment is important to me. So I actually have no idea where I was going with that. But that's my ritual stuff, and that's how ritual works for me. And I truly have lost my train of thought because I got so into the idea of, I don't know. I went to college for I started off in college in the English department because I wanted to be a writer, and then learned that I didn't need to go to college to be a writer. I already was. Moved over into the psych department. Really had some issues with some people's attitudes about mental health, and especially like the Prozac culture at the time. I wanted to heal people's souls more than I wanted to just give them medications, which then led me into the religious studies department. So I spent most of my time in college, at least undergrad, in the religious studies department, learning demonology from the Jesuits and learning Buddhism from Paul Natupsky, who I'm pretty sure, like, he would luncheon with the Dalai Lama, so he wasn't just talking out of his ass. During that time, that's when I developed my ideas, my attitudes. I'm like, what role does ritual, does spirituality, like, what do these do for us in our lives? I was raised Catholic. I don't have a very high opinion of religion when it becomes just habit, just something you do because that's what everybody has told you is right. That goes against the way I interface with the world. My Catholic church had like a huge Mary thing going, like to the point where there's now a shrine. And so there was a rosary group, and I kind of got, they really tried to push everybody into that. And the thing with saying the rosary, that like there was this epiphany I had. Because we're sitting there, I'm there with like my two best friends at the time. I think we're like maybe in 5th or 6th grade, and we would just race each other to see how many decades of the rosary we could say. Like, we're just sitting there going, Hail Mary, full of grace, and like to the point where like it's just sound, it's just babble. It had no meaning whatsoever. And in that moment, like, I'm going, this can't be the purpose for this. Now, in studying religions around the world and mystical practices around the world, there is a point, there is some value in doing something repetitive and something rhythmic to a point where sort of your body keeps doing the thing and your brain and the rest of you disengages, kind of goes into a different state. Mantras, different types of meditations, like, that has a value to it. But that's certainly not what is intended or what's practiced by people who are saying the rosary currently. Whether or not that might have been something intended way back in the day, kind of doubt, but I can't argue that's not my wheelhouse. So what I set out to do was try to come up with a spirituality, a practice that allowed for spontaneity, that allowed for individuality, that allowed for each person to find the path that worked best for them. And along the way, I sort of accidentally invented my own religion, accidentally on purpose, I guess. And that's not just House Keperu, but like the Keprian tradition. There's people who like that. That's a thing. Like that's out in the world now. It's why it's up on sacred texts. I don't make a big deal about that, and like the people it's touched and the things that you can see it come out in. But that's a thing that I did. And it's a thing that I'm happy to just release into the world, because I think the ideas aren't revolutionary. Like they just, I don't know, we'd stopped thinking about them, I think. Got so ingrained in habits that were being handed to us. Oh yeah, yep, Doctor Who. This one is from a company called Church. I was watching Doctor Who back when it was on the PBS, and I was 12. I mean, like way back. I think, well, actually, I've been watching Doctor Who long enough that my favorite Doctor growing up was Peter Davison. I just came in before, like after Tom Baker. Like I didn't get a chance to like really get into Tom Baker. I met that actor and his work through a BBC production of C.S. Lewis, so I knew him as Hoodlum. Yeah, I mean, if somebody wants, there are other sellers on Etsy that make Kyphi, and I've bought Kyphi from a couple of them to just kind of like, so that I can make some informed recommendations. Like if this is like not your wheelhouse, or if I'm sold out, everybody uses a different recipe. Um, I what was it? I'm trying to remember there was one that I was like, I honestly liked their Kyphi and their style. They used a little bit more camphor. Like I don't know why they used camphor, and it had a much, much sharper scent, but it burned bright and clean and deep. Um, if you don't want to buy it, the recipes are up on my website. Pardon me. I've done all the research for you. I've done all of the calculations and whatnot to make it something that you can just make in your kitchen with cups and tablespoons, rather than these like old and kind of obscure measurements. But I will be honest, the ingredients are not easy to source. A couple of them are incredibly rare. One in particular, gum mastic, is Chios gum. You can really only get it from a couple of places in Greece, and it's not cheap, but it's worth it. And gum mastic is one of the ingredients that, having experimented with a couple of different versions of Kyphi, it's essential to it. Honey also is essential to it, which is why, like, I've got a couple of substitutions for some of the obscure ingredients, and I know that some people would like to make a vegan version of this, and I don't know that you can make a vegan version of this and call it Kyphi. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Bees and honey and beeswax and all of the stuff surrounding bee products and bee culture were a very significant, very symbolic, even sacred thing in ancient Egypt. It was integral to medicine. The bee was a symbol of Pharaoh. There's a lot of stuff woven in with it. And so the honey in this is not only for its sacred associations, it's in there also because of how it bonds with everything. It's in there how it helps to preserve everything. So honey, you really can't have a substitute and still call it Kyphi. The frankincense and the myrrh, it depends on who you source it from. I will say, be mindful of that. At this point, because of the cosmetics industry, because of like the big profusion of new age things, uh, everybody and their kid sister is hot to get their hands on stuff like that. And it's become something that is oversourced and not always responsibly sourced. And to the point where it is endangering some of the things that produce this. Uh, so be mindful of how it's sourced and where it's coming from. Some things like dragon's blood, which is in the lunar eclipse Kyphi, is for a while like its cost spiked really high. So it was like I was seeing like $120 a pound. It's come back down to about half that, but make sure that it is what you think you're getting. I have seen gum mastic sold on Etsy and on a couple of other websites. And I will tell you, if it is not coming directly through the Chios Gum Association, it's not gum mastic. In the same way that certain food items and wines are named for the regions in France that they come from, and they can only come from that. Like that's a thing. Or certain cheeses like Parmesan can only come if they're authentic, come from there. That is the same deal for gum mastic. And the difference is gum mastic is grown and harvested. It's not like it's something that you can make a version of. So that one ingredient in particular, like you are beholden to looking up what Chios gum is, sometimes spelled Chios, and sometimes spelled with the Greek, letter that looks like an X, IOS, and accept no substitute. Also, hello. I'm starting to get to the point where my voice is a little bit rough, but we'll keep going because this is letting me get away from the news for a little while. Um, oh, Tanya asks, since the pandemic took hold, have the ghosts of the house been more active or have they been quiet? Um, it depends on the ghosts. So I own a haunted location called Inspiration House. It is a 150-year-old home in Oberlin, Ohio, and it's very haunted. It's actually one of the most physically active hauntings that I've been involved in, that I've gotten to witness, that isn't negative. Like most of these are just elderly people who lived most of their lives in the house and they died in the house and they liked it so much that they just haven't moved. And like the most negative stuff is the people who owned the place before me. Um, in a nutshell, their lives melted down in a very short period of time, and a lot of bad happened to them. And there's a lot of like depression and suicidal, like just a lot of bad. And it's not like their ghosts are haunting the place. But there's a lot of residual energy that they left behind, and it just sort of like permeated the walls like nicotine from a pack-a-day smoker. And while I've cleaned a lot of that off, there's still a thread of it that you can pick up in a couple other rooms of just this ick. Um, but one of the things I noticed with Inspiration House is the activity there seems to be, well, it's twofold. It seems to be sort of seasonal. There's certain times of the year where they're more active, and certain times of the year where they seem to kind of like, I don't know, huddle in and get quiet and just sort of like sit around and play the spirit equivalent of gin rummy. Uh, and because it was, a farming area, and that's sort of the cycle, they're more active in the spring and the summer and in the fall. But in the winter, there tends to be like this sort of dry period where they're there. But you can tell that they're just used to being snowed in during Ohio winters. So they just kind of hunker in, and if you talk to them, if you engage with them, they'll respond, but they're not, rattling the cupboards or, opening doors and whatnot. The other thing is they are very responsive to people. So if there's a small group or a single person in the home, and that person is behaving in the way that would make an elderly person want to come and hang out with them. So, they're not being confrontational, they're not being a dick, they're just kind of pleasantly hanging around, being a person, maybe doing their own thing, the ghosts of Inspiration House get curious and they engage a little bit and they make their presence known with footsteps and with moving things, with playing music boxes. And they're generally just neat people to know. I'm very happy with those. Nicole, that is wonderful to know. Uh, and I'm glad like Corvus, aka Eric, is still around doing his thing. All right, I think I might be at the point where I need to just start putting this in the little tins. So for folks who are new to the stream, what you see me doing is rolling and preparing the latest batch of my Kyphi, which is an ancient temple incense made according to a recipe that is over 2,000 years old, and done the old-fashioned way with copper pots and stone mortars, and will be shipping and for sale today. Right now, enough people went to the website and bought it that we need to get back on the website and release more. We, sell it in small batches so that we never run the risk of selling out, and having to contact somebody over the website and be like, yeah, sorry you bought that, but it's gone. Because I hate when that happens. But at the moment, I am hand rolling these little pieces of incense. This one has a little bit more cinnamon in the mix, so it's got like this nice, warm, spicy bouquet. If you're curious, the website has the ingredient list of each of the vintages of Kyphi. The ones that will be going back up and be available: Silver Mirror, which is for spirit communication and opening your psychic abilities. And then there is Lunar Eclipse, which is protection during the dark hours. And then this one is Phoenix for rebirth and rejuvenation and rising from our ashes. As you can tell, it's a very laborious, fiddly process, but kind of fun for all that. I will be smelling like this for days. Okay, now I need my tins. Move that out of the way. Yeah, this has turned into a whole production. Kat Mason Rogers, my good friend and talented artist, made these nice little like logos and stickers to go on it to make it look all fancy. Huh. I wonder if that's because so there's a question about the website. I wonder if being funny, if Illyria is right at this moment making updates. That's what I think might be the case. So wait a couple of minutes, hit refresh, see if it changes. Okay. And don't mind me as I cut little pieces of this to put in the tins. You're getting to see how the sausage is made. Yeah, I started doing this partly so I could stop doom scrolling over on Twitter. I'm kind of afraid to go look at the news. Hopefully it hasn't gotten any worse. That would be great. And this is just unbleached parchment paper, baking parchment. So, because it needs a non-stick thing to keep it. Now, because it's so heavy with resins and whatnot, it is something that if it is left in the heat or the sun, it will get sticky. And honestly, just keep it in a cool, dark place. The drier, the better. And you don't have to burn it all when you first get it. You can store it in a drawer and take like a little piece of it and store it loose. In if you've got a little box with your ritual objects, if you've got a jewelry box, if you've got some little like magical, I have a box that I put intentions in. So like I'll write things on pieces of paper that I want to bring into my life, bring into the world. And the Kyphi, just one piece, like put it in there and it will like permeate the place. You don't have to burn it for the scent. It's very strong. Watching and crocheting. Kyphi making I can do. I've never really gotten a very good sense of crocheting whispering times. Yeah, I'm not gonna look. Like I saw enough and I know enough and I can feel enough. And for me right now, that's all I really, yep, I'm good for now. I'm just gonna make Kyphi and lose myself in the process. Okay, so this one's lunar eclipse. There. Sorry. Scratch that. Reverse. Lunar eclipse. Silver mirror. I swear every time I buy these little tins, they send me something that's a different shape. This is usually when I'm like humming to myself or singing songs, and the problem, of course, is the algorithms are so quick to ban something, even if I'm singing music that I wrote myself. 4, 5, 6, 7. That one had a piece that was too tiny, so there we go. Bop, bop, bop. One, 2, 3, 4. I mean, hopefully this isn't super, super boring. Fill them up, stick stickers on them. Yeah, I'm curious if y'all hit refresh, if the website is updated now or something. And I wish I could like share the scent rather than just like describing it and sounding like, I don't know, some bougie restaurant trying to explain their wine of the day. And as you can tell, like right now, the website is showing that we're out of all of them. And what that means right now is simply that we are out of what was prepared. And I am in the process of restocking. Oh. Yeah, I was hitting a bad spiral with keeping up on the news today because there's a point where being informed, you can actually do something, and there's a point where you are at in your space and your life and what's going on, like you can't fix what's happening, a couple hundred, a couple thousand miles away. So you just have to be like, okay, universe, hope you got this. I'm gonna actually the most useful thing you can do is take care of yourself at that point. Take care of yourself so that you can take care of others who rely on you. I think there are some toxic aspects of our culture that maybe we would do well to examine and get rid of, which would be the fact that, when bad things are happening, there's this push that we have that it's good and right and noble to like push ourselves into it and try to like fix it and do things. And if we're not somehow suffering, if we're not pushing past the pain and trying to fix it, that we're not doing enough or we're not doing anything. And a good soldier on a battlefield knows when to retreat and like when to make a tactical fallback in order to gather resources and prepare and heal up and rest so that they are better able to approach the problem. And, not to necessarily like make everything sound like we're fighting a war, but I think we need to consider like resource management is just as essential, if not more essential, than the actual action and the actual like trying to push against something. You also are a resource. Your energy, your time, your ability to even like get through it, those are resources. Keep resource management in mind. It's not just being active and trying to push. Like you have to do that from a place of strength and a place of safety, which means that making sure that you are in a place of strength and in a place of safety is important. Yeah, if you are coming in late on the stream, I go all over the place based on like questions, whatever's on my mind while I'm making this, and in between you'll hear things about like what Kyphi is, what it does, yada yada. If you came in late, never fear. I log it. You can go back and watch it when I am done streaming. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Everything smells fantastic in here right now. We are the many born, we are the immortal. Eternal, we wander the aeons, moving to the rhythm of our own inner tides. We are active elements, moving through passive worlds. Hello, hello. All right, let's see. Still doing the boring stuff. We are the many born, we are the immortal. Eternal, we wander the aeons, moving to the rhythm of our own inner tides. We are active elements, moving through passive worlds. That one was tiny again. All right. Downside with trying to sing after I've been talking for 2 hours is my voice is already fried, so I apologize if that was a little raspy. And now it's stick stickers on the little things. I imagine seeing this is a little bit like my first introduction to monolith graphics with Joseph Fargo and Christine Philippak. They had this magazine called Dark Realms. They had all this cool stuff, and you assume that when you see people's stuff in a store and in the mall and whatnot, and they're all over the place, that it's a company and there's all these people. And it turns out it's just 2 folks and a couple of kids wrapping things up and shipping it out and putting it all together themselves. So I just got the little sound that my, at least one of my earphone things just died. So I think what I might do is I am going to bid you all adieu, and I will finish these up. If you are interested in the Kyphi, check back on the website. The stuff that's sold out, at least Solar Mirror, Lunar Eclipse, and Phoenix, will be back in live certainly by the evening, and you will be able to order more. There is, as you can see, ample stuff. I just have to package it for you. So take care, everyone. Take care of yourselves. Hang in there. Take care of one another. And don't do anything just because you think you're supposed to. Do it because you want to. Good night.